Hi, everybody. This is Samantha Furlow, and I am so happy to have you back here for the second week in a row. I hope the first week went well. I just got done listening to Miranda's videos about effective listening and positive communication, and I am excited to jump right in. So we're going to talk about effective problem-solving skills, and then we're also going to have a little bit more about our going into difficult conversations. So as Miranda had talked about, we are going to give you 2 opportunities each week to do learning goals. You only have to do 1 each week, however, you could choose to do 2. I know that Miranda had given 1 in her previous lesson, and so I'm going to talk about mine. So if I was writing a learning goal today, something I might want to write about is making a plan for effective problem solving. I know that before I had a framework to go off of with problem solving, I was not as successful, and it caused a lot of frustration for me. And just to make sure everybody knows where to find their learning goals, they're in the purple book. All of the learning goals are going to have the same handout number. It will always say handout 1.2.2. Now on the side of your learning goals, I have typed in a number identifying them. So this one that I have a picture of here is called Learning Goal 2. Sometimes parents in my class think that it's important that we do Learning Goal 2 during week 2. That's not the case at all. You are perfectly welcome to use whichever specific learning goal page you get to first, and that's just fine. It's not a big deal. So again, this is an example that I wrote, though you might have a different example or a different thing that you want to focus your learning around today, and that's perfectly fine. You are more than encouraged to write a goal that is specific for you. So I want to turn to our yellow books, and I want to re-go over this handout 1.2.3 that Miranda had talked about last week. I think Miranda did a fabulous job, and I'm not going to go nearly as in-depth as her. I just want us to give it another minute to look at so that we can be reminded of it and prepared as we go into the next assignment. So as a reminder, this is a step ladder that tells us the steps to effective communication. And this is something that I use anytime I'm going to be requesting, making a request of somebody, especially if maybe me and that person haven't had great communication in the past, or maybe even haven't had a great relationship in the past. This can be a nice framework that's going to help me guide my conversation, and it's going to make it have a more positive outcome. So on this page, we start down at the bottom with ask. So I want to ask that listener if now's a good time to talk. If it's not a good time to talk, I don't want to ask them for something. Maybe they're stressed out, maybe they're upset about something. If they're not in a good headspace to give me their full attention or to maybe be able to collaborate with me, it's not going to be a good time for me to be asking them for some special help or special efforts or a change in our previous agreements. The next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to invite them to tell me how they are doing. This is a practice in empathy. Just like that video that Miranda had us watch at the end of her last lesson, we learned about how empathy is putting ourselves in the shoes of another person. Even if the person I'm talking to isn't necessarily my favorite person, I can still empathize with whatever they identify as feeling with. This is going to help to build a relationship with them, and then it's also going to be a further reminder to me of whether this is a good time to be asking or to be going into this conversation. Then I'm going to state my feelings and my goals of what I want to happen. I need to do this in the framework of an I feel statement or an I would like statement. These statements need to be future focused, they need to be positive, and they need to be specific. So if I am asking for, maybe I'm wanting to have a 4-day weekend this week, I can't ask it in a way of, I want more time off work. My boss isn't going to have a good way to respond to that. They don't know what I'm asking of them. And so this could cause frustration in that conversation. So instead, what I want to say is, I'm feeling a little stressed because my family is meeting at a beach house this week and I haven't seen them in a long time, and I know that there's a lot of work to be done here, but I really want to be able to have a 4-day weekend this week so that I could make that long drive and be able to see them. Something like that, something that's very clear and that the listener knows what it is I'm asking of them. Next, I want to validate what their concerns are regarding my request. People need an opportunity to process what the request is and to share what their feelings are on it. As Miranda had said, this is definitely going to have an impact on their life and maybe the lives of my other coworkers. And so it's really important that I'm giving them the opportunity to process what that means for them and to be able to ask those questions or state their concerns before they make a final decision. The next thing I want to do is I finally am in the goal of seeking partnership. We again want to remember that the point to this conversation is to reach that goal I originally had in mind. So in my choices that I'm making during this conversation, I need to be in my head circling back to that. What is the goal here? Maybe it's that I'm asking for that 4-day weekend. Maybe it's that I'm asking for a change in my visitation schedule. Maybe it's that I'm asking for a raise from my boss. Anytime I'm going into a difficult conversation, I can use this framework. And I, again, need to keep my focuses on what is that final goal. So, with that being said, I want us all to grab our purple books, and I want you to turn to handout 2.2.1. It's a 2-page spread, and the name of the assignment is called a conversation role play plan, and we're going to go through this together. So if we were in class together, I would have you break up into partners and you would each go through this role play plan together. However, we don't have that luxury, and so instead I'm going to go through this conversation role play plan. And you could either write down the things that I'm writing down, or maybe you have your own examples that you want to work through. So the first question says, and I typed it here so you could write this in your book, Samantha is a parent asking my probation officer to start some parenting time. I haven't been able to see my children for almost 6 months. So in this particular conversation role play plan, I am the parent that is asking for something. You could write it as it is me, the parent that's asking for something. You could write it as yourself, or you could come up with a different scenario. So the next question says, decide who will play the incarcerated parent and who will play the caregiver. I tried to find a tool that I could strike through those incarcerated words. When we're in class, I tell people to just put a cross out in that because that's not relevant to our class. So I wrote that I am Samantha, and that I'm playing that incarcerated parent or that parent, and then the caregiver, or in this case, the probation officer, is being played maybe by one of you. So I had wrote John Doe and Emily and etc. to try to represent that. So the next step on 3 says to write a goal statement that the parent will plan to say to the probation officer. This goal statement should include the request that the parent is making of the probation officer. I need to be specific, future focused, start with I, and tell what I want to have happen. So I said, I want to have parenting time with my children. I would like to be able to see my children every Saturday from 12 p.m. to 6 p.m. at my house. So I started with I'm future focused. I'm not bringing up the past. I'm telling what I want to have happen. I'm also being very specific. I'm saying what day it is, what time it is, where it's at. All of this information is important for that probation officer to be able to give me an accurate answer without the conversation becoming derailed. So I'm going to go ahead and click the next slide over, and it's going to bring us to page 2. You feel free to pause while you finish filling this in for yourself. So now we are on page 2 of that same handout, and I'm up here at the top at question 4. And this says, the probation officer will bring up concerns, complaints, or worries regarding my request. Together, we're going to write down some concerns or complaints that the probation officer might bring up. Now, if we were doing this in class, we'd be able to brainstorm this together. However, I am just having to come up with the brainstorm on my own. So my PO might say something like, I haven't followed all of their requests. I'm doing better now, but they're worried that I'm not going to continue to follow through. I also think, so the probation officer might also think that there needs to be some steps between seeing them for the first time and rebuilding my bond before they spend 6 hours unsupervised at my house. Now, that could be what the probation officer says to me. They may also say different things as well. So then number 5 says, plan some verbal and nonverbal listening techniques that we both can use to validate each other's concerns and or requests. And then we could write these ideas down. So if we were in class, we would be acting this out. And so that's where you would list these things, and then with the intention of practicing them. Unfortunately, we can't do that. So I wrote down just some things that I could do if I was having this conversation. I could nod my head. I could use some listening sounds like Miranda had mentioned, like yes, and I understand. I could mirror their body language, and I could keep my phone down and not look at it. On to number 6. This says to think of some possible solutions that will work for both of you. Now, as a reminder, when we're going into these difficult conversations, we have to recognize that it's a difficult request because there could be some barriers, and I shouldn't go into it thinking that I will definitely get everything I want or nothing at all. What's more reasonable is a compromise. And so I came up with some possible solutions that maybe could work for both of us. So maybe we could start with a phone call 3 times a week. Maybe organize a 2-hour visit with myself, kids, and another trusted person, like maybe grandma or uncle. I really want that trusted person to be someone that I feel comfortable around, but my kids also feel comfortable around as well. And maybe we arrange this to happen at a public place, maybe a park or McDonald's with a play place. And this is proposed to happen on Saturdays for the first month. So we will reevaluate after that. I want us to remember that when we are reunifying with our children and reconnecting with them, that it might be a bit of a process. And so I had started the request with wanting to be able to have them from 12 to 6 every Saturday, and that may not be a reasonable request to start with. And so instead, I can compromise with a smaller amount of time, but also knowing that we will reevaluate later on and be able to extend that time. If you're not done with that last page, go ahead and pause and finish up before going on to here. So now we're going to turn the page again, and we're on handout 2.2.2, and it has these two grids. Now again, if we were in person, we would be organizing this role play with our partner, and then we would perform it in front of another partnership. And that other partnership would score us during our conversation to see if we did these specific things. Now, I'll just kind of quickly go through and try to model what these might look like. So I'm going to go with that same scenario where I'm asking my probation officer for some more time. So I'm going to ask the probation officer, how are they doing? Hi, Officer Smith, how are you doing today? I'm going to empathize with their response. Maybe PO said, I'm really stressed out, and I had a lot of due dates kind of collide today, and I'm wanting to, I'm really feeling like I need to catch up. And so I really want to validate and say, I imagine that is really stressful. I can identify with that when I have had projects colliding at work on the same day as well. Then I'm going to go into that I statement, and I'm going to say, I feel really sad that I haven't seen my kids in 6 months. I am really wanting, I would like to be able to move to having 6-hour visits every Saturday from 12 to 6 p.m. at my house. What do you think about that? And then I'm going to listen quietly while they respond, and I'm going to maybe practice some of these nonverbal listening techniques, maybe leaning forward, making eye contact, mirroring their body language. And I'm going to really listen to what they have to say. I'm not going to make excuses in response, even if I disagree with what they are saying. This is, again, a conversation where I'm requesting something of somebody, and I need to be willing to hear them speak their truth. I want to acknowledge their worries, their concerns, and I also want to validate their positive efforts. And so I may say something like, yep, I understand that I did make XYZ mistakes in the past, and I have been involved with parenting class and attending the other groups that you had asked me to, and I am putting my effort into them, and I am learning things from those groups. I also understand that the reason why this has happened is to keep kids and families safe, and I want to be accountable for those choices. I also know that it's important that I have a relationship with my kids, and so I want to be able to be accountable and also know how we can get on a path of moving forward to spending time together again. So I want to summarize what they're saying, which I think I did a maybe adequate job of. I need to avoid interrupting. I want to avoid words like never, always, and should. And then I ultimately want to come to an agreement with them. Maybe the agreement is that one that I had written down previously of being able to meet each other at a park with grandma. Maybe the agreement is that I get through half of the parenting class and my other groups before we talk about this again. Maybe the agreement is that we start with once a week phone calls. And then I want to thank the other person for listening to what my concerns are. And then we would also have the listener practice a lot of these same skills as well. So you might be feeling like, what is the point in this? What is the point in doing a role play practice with someone pretending to be my probation officer or my co-parent instead of them actually doing it? Because the conversation isn't going to be the same. They're not going to respond the same. And maybe we haven't had a good relationship in the past. So I recognize that this practice is not the same as real life. I also want to relate it to something that maybe some of us have some experience with. And so many of us played sports in school, like football, and a big aspect of football during football practices and other sports practices, though they may use a different word, are doing scrimmages. And so a scrimmage is when my team is split up into two teams and we play against each other as a practice. Now, a scrimmage, of course, is not exactly the same as that real game. It's not my rival team. I'm not in front of the crowd late at night. And very hyped up for this. And I'm also playing against my teammates and my friends. So I'm probably not going to go full force like I would in real life. However, anybody that has participated in football or other sports that utilize this teaching skill recognize the value in going through that scrimmage, even though it is not exactly the same as when they are in the big game. The things we're learning in Parenting Inside Out are much the same way. And we want to keep that in mind, that although it's not exactly the same, we have gone through that process once while doing our scrimmage in Parenting Inside Out class. And so that makes us more prepared and more capable of being able to making it through trying this new skill in real life as well. Something that we want to remember is that the more we practice any new skill, the more comfortable we will become in using it. And I can personally say that using this conversation plan with these steps to effective communication is something that I have practiced a lot over the past few years and now just comes as second nature. Maybe I recognize that I have room for growth in my conversation skills, and I'm looking at this plan and thinking, how am I going to remake the entire way I talk or speak to people before my next difficult conversation? I also feel overwhelmed when I'm given this list of all these different changes I need to incorporate at once. And so what I would suggest to you in that situation, if you are like me in that way, is to take smaller bites. If all of this is feeling overwhelming, let's just start at the very beginning. Maybe make a commitment to yourself that this week, every time you start a conversation or start a request, you'll ask the person that you're speaking with if now is a good time to talk. Something that is one small change that can be made. And once you do that for a few days or a week, it's just going to become a habit and just part of the way that you communicate regularly. And so that will then you'll be able to move on to that next step. Okay, I'm gonna end this video and I'll see you soon with our next video for this week.